name is Harold Davis. I'm here to teach you about the art and craft of digital photography.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Harold Davis Studio in Berkeley, California. We are so pleased to have you with us today. This is going to be the webinar Noir. Noir evokes black and white films of the 1940s with dames, private eyes, and fedoras, low-key lighting, and harsh shadows. More generally, a sense of noir has come to mean a range of stylish black and white techniques. In this webinar, Private Camera Eye Harold will take a deep dive into noir as a style and how noir can be used to create contemporary photos. Along the way, you can expect readings from Dashiell Hammett and Thomas Pynchon, and even a guest appearance from a Maltese Falcon. In the second half of the webinar, Harold will use examples from his own work to demonstrate implementing noir in specific Photoshop case studies. Many of you know who Harold is, but if you're joining us today for the first time, here's a little bit about Private Eye Harold. Harold Davis is the developer of a unique technique for photographing flowers for transparency. He's the creator of multi-raw processing and Hand-HDR processing. He is a Moab Master and a Zeiss Ambassador. Harold is an internationally known photographer and a sought-after workshop leader, and his website is digitalfieldguide.com. Now, let's hand it over to Private Eye Harold here.
Hi, sweetheart. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, greetings, darling. You're welcome.
And thank you for the wonderful quotes from RBG as well. We mourn her passing and celebrate her life, truly. Okay, so I decided to have a little bit of fun here, and I hope you'll indulge me in the fun. What we have is really a three-part presentation. So in the first part, I'm going to be reading some, doing a little noir reading, and then showing some images and talking about them. And then in the end part of this, we'll actually have a look at some Photoshop techniques that I used in some of the images that I've presented. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and get started. Okay, webinar noir, stylish, black and white. I think it's fun. Many of you I've seen in the chat box have received your copies of this. I just got mine. I love how the book is produced. It's really a beautiful book. And the subtitle of the book is Making Great Photos of Flowers, Gardens, Landscapes, and the Beautiful World Around Us. So it is about garden photography, but it's also about more than the garden. Okay. The Maltese Falcon. Well, so on Malta, it's surprisingly hard to find a Maltese Falcon, but they do exist. Here you can see some statuettes, and I'm going to have to, first of all, I'm going to have to read a little bit about the Maltese Falcon. This is from the Dashiell Hammett novel from the 1930s, actually. They drank and lowered their glasses. The fat man looked shrewdly at Spade and asked, "You're a close-mouthed man?" Spade shook his head. "I like to talk." Here, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I like to talk. "Better and better," the fat man exclaimed. "I distrust a closed-mouthed man. He generally picks the wrong time to talk and says the wrong things. Talking something you can't do judiciously unless you keep in practice." He beamed over his glass. "We'll get along, sir. That we will. Of course, Sydney Greenstreet, it was in the 1941 movie, and I can't quite equal him. Swell, will we talk about the black bird? So I like to talk to a man who likes to talk. That means ask questions. And I have to bring up my black bird. And you can see it says the Maltese Falcon. And if you look at the bottom, it says, this is a craft product genuinely made in Malta, e.g., I was not made in China. I was actually made in Malta, which, considering the square footage of Malta, it's about 2 square feet. It's kind of an amazing thing. All right, let me go back to the slideshow for a second. Here's another Maltese Falcon. This was a falcon literally photographed on Malta. And while we're there, let me read another quote from Dashiell Hammett about the Maltese Falcon. Well, now, the Emperor Charles has just given the Malta all the rent he asks is 1 insignificant bird per annum, just as a matter of form. What could be more natural than for these immeasurably wealthy knights to look around for some way of expressing their gratitude? Well, sir, that's exactly what they did. And they hit on the happy thought of sending Charles for that first year's tribute, not an insignificant live bird, but a glorious golden falcon encrusted from head to foot with the finest jewels in their coffers. And remember, sir, they had fine ones, the finest out of Asia. Okay, so Malta is a place with some spooky history, and here's a sort of time travel via zoom shot of one of the interior streets of Malta. And this is St. Agnes's Street in the gut of Malta. So let me read you next a little bit of Thomas Pynchon. This is from his novel V, which was written in the late 1940s. Which of this crew couldn't pick up tomorrow and go off to Malta, go off to the moon? Ask them why, and they'll answer why not. I could not care less about Valletta, but hadn't been there something, after all, about the bombed out buildings, buff-colored rubble, excitement of Kingsway? What did Paola call the island of cradle of life? And winter, the green Zebek, whose figurehead was Astarte, goddess of sexual love, tacked slowly into the Grand Harbor. Yellow bastions, Moorish-looking city, rainy sky. What more on first glance? Okay, so let's get back to some photography. Here's Valletta from a kind of perch that is on top of a bridge, over a bridge, looking at looking out towards the gut. You can see the kind of Moorish aspect of the city, although there are 1 or 2 satellite things in it. I'm trading to another haunted city. This is Palermo in Sicily, and this is one of the big public fountains there, this sort of ugly looking creature. And also in Palermo, this guy holds up the pediments of a building. You can vaguely see the arches. Why would I photograph these sinister things? Well, good question. So what could be more noir than the Coast of Death? The souvenirs from the Costa da Morte. That's in the northwest part of Spain, looking up at this lighthouse here, guarding the Coast of Death. This is Corleone in Sicily, a hill town in Sicily, which had nothing to do with any godfather or anything, but of course it's become kind of famous and a place where people take trips to because of the Godfather movies. And here we are in the Paris Catacombs. The city of Paris was built on graveyards for millions of people, and literally at times they fell in and were packed in like this. Cemetery in Transylvania, and with this kind of cemetery, what they did was they did a memorial of the person, and apparently this guy got into trouble over the bottles of wine you see there, and that was his downfall. So as long as we're on the topic of Transylvania, you know, if you'd like, you can certainly check into the Hotel Castle Dracul, and you'd have a welcome from the cartoon character you see there in the front of this one. Here's another Transylvanian castle, the Castle of Unadora, with shot in black and white, where I've also done color versions of this photo, which, to be honest, are more popular with collectors, but in black and white, it's got an interesting noir effect as far as I'm concerned with the sunburst. And a portrait of a man building who makes his living in his 90s, he's in his 90s, building hose in rural Romania and Roma. This man has had his kids tattooed on his body. He's a EMT technician, and I figured it's kind of a noir portrait with the eyes like that coming out of the darkness. And similarly, this entrepreneur in rural Romania is dark and kind of shaft of chiaroscuro light coming down in the back. So one of the characteristics of noir would be a heavy contrast between lights and darks. The purpose of this studio exercise was to duplicate somewhat the effects of the photographer George Hurrell, who was a Hollywood portraitist. And the general idea there, and I'm going to get into this in more detail, was to use high contrast lighting, but make it very soft. The lenses that they used, the apochromatic lenses in the 1930s, made the softness part of this fairly easy, or they could further soften it by putting a stocking or Vaseline over. These days our lenses are so much sharper that we really have to work to get softness, but it's still quite possible to mimic the effect via high contrast lighting, but with optical softness. So keep in mind Hurrell lighting. A spotlight effect is another way to go noir, and definitely very black and white. This is a in-camera multiple exposure on a black background. So if you're doing a multiple exposure of a light-colored moving subject, the black is going to cancel itself out. So what you get is the patterns that you make with the light-colored subject. In this case, the model, who may be more 50s than 40s, but here she is. Very, very skillful model who worked very well with me to make this image. And similarly here, where the outer shape of the multiple exposure is a heart. Phyllis, do stop me if I have any questions, okay?
Absolutely. Nothing yet.
Yeah, so the next couple of images are actually in hotel lobbies, mostly in France. So go figure. This one was facing in this direction with the reception desk right behind the statue. So I got basically where the reception people were with my iPhone and made it. Another in-camera multiple exposure using the black background to create the effect. And I just threw this little Vietnamese devil in for luck. I mean, there you go. This is a Halloween mask spectacle that we have in in the kids enjoy. It echoes back to you what it says. It takes a little doing to capture it though, with the lights on like that, to make a good noir image. And here, this is a setup in a cave with specific lighting aimed to do the contrast between the black silhouette and the black silhouette up top and the light at the end of the tunnel, as it were. Single light, harsh shadow, that's a very noir kind of thing. You can do it with still lifes like this egg slicer or these glasses here, where the shadow of the glasses meets the actual image. The background set up a piece of plain paper on a piece of burlap, one single harsh light, no modification for the light. And same thing here for this egg yolk strainer. The point of the photo really being the spiral of the shadow meeting the spiral of the egg. And these are seeds coming out again, lit the same way, with a single light, with the shadow meeting the detail of the actual light. This image is one of the ones I have in the examples that are coming up, and it's turned upside down from the way I shot it, first of all, and then again, it's a harsh light where the shadow is made to be the main thing and the dominant subject against the light and the detail on the pavement on the right. This is a pandemic image, one of the few that I'm showing that's recent, on the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. They have a newly opened footpath you can walk across. So this is about midway across that span. And the point here really of this image is the way my feet down there merge into the shadow. So that it gives a little bit of optical illusion about the whole image. As you'll see, it takes a bit of post-production to make that actually happen. It's a monochromatic HDR image of a old Russian workbench from Fort Ross up in the coast of California, and processed to bring out the chiaroscuro in the image. I think this is the one that Phyllis uses as a background, and the point of this image is to emphasize the circumflex key on this French typewriter so that it's in focus and the rest of the image is in isolation. And this is an example of what I call the Blossfeldt effect, of kind of sepia tinted noir with the plants in highlights and the background quite dark. What could be more noir than a fun house, like the fun house in the Orson Welles film, The Third Man, or there's that other one with a fun house too. The issue in making a photograph like this is figuring out how to position the camera so as to not have the camera in the image. It's harder than meets the eye. And here we have an iPhone image from the south of France. It's an architectural study in Pavia, Italy. This is an old dilapidated palace in Trinidad, Cuba. So it's kind of a noir. This thing is decaying, so that's another way to look at it. Of course, San Francisco is got to be the center for noir. And this one is another one that I have as part of my examples. It's the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin at sunrise. What I did, and sometimes the devil is in the details, it's a little hard to see in this slideshow, so we will look at it up close. But what I did was I painted in a little bit of red in the taillights and in the stoplight, as you'll see, besides combining two exposures to get the density of the image right. This is downtown San Francisco, and a noirish image because one wants to know, what's the story here? What's happening up in that window up on the upper right? I mean, what's the drama behind the curtains? What's going on here in this anonymous city? What kinds of things are happening? And okay, come on in. We have a mystery guest of some kind. Give me a second here. I'm going to stop this share. What is? Oh, detective sir, what is it? Ah!
I'll be asking the questions here. Where were you on the night of May the 1st, 1907?
What night was that?
I'll be asking the questions.
All right,
here.
ask the question, sir.
Where were you on the night of May the 1st, 1907?
That is a very good question. And do you know, we
I
have
know
here
that you-
a Maltese Falcon.
That's what I was looking for.
Oh, no.
I know you buried the Falcon with a copy of Harold Davis's garden photography book.
Is that though?
Yes, that is so. And that's the other thing we're looking for, the matching garden photography book.
You mean this book over here?
Ah, exactly. Thank you for complying.
Thank you, Nicholas. And
No problem.
and a cameo from Nicholas, from the wonderful, the inimitable, the very tolerant Nicholas Davis.
And Deborah wonders, what is chiaroscuro?
So interesting. Chiaroscuro is an art history term, generally, that is used to describe high contrast lighting, variation between lights and dark. That's what the word has come to mean. However, it was originally an Italian phrase coined by the contemporaries of Leonardo da Vinci, and Leonardo was considered the finest practitioner of the chiaroscuro, where variations between light and darks were used to create the optical illusion of depth. So it was the key painting technique behind paintings that show depth. These days, when you say chiaroscuro, people think of something like Rembrandt lighting, and or like this photo that's up on the screen right now of showing shafts of light coming down and a little bit lit up and not the rest. But the actual original meaning is of a technique that contrasts lights and darks to create the illusion of depth. And it's part, I use the original meaning, chiaroscuro, following the original meaning quite a bit in my photography on lightbox technique. I think it is mentioned and described in a couple of pages of the Creative Garden photography book. And certainly open to follow-up questions on it. It's something worth looking up and having a look at how artists have used chiaroscuro throughout history since the Renaissance. I think we're coming slightly to the end of the slideshow, and these are sort of noir landscapes, the lowering clouds and the storm over this abandoned farmhouse in the southwest of France, and an abandoned Knights Templar set up in France as well. So let's start with, well, since it's first here, let's start with approaching the Brandenburg Gate. Here's the way the final image looked. I'm not promising I'll get back to the final as I show processing it, but there you have it. And when I said I painted in rear headlights, you can, here I better go in a little closer. You can see that. So let's keep this in mind as perhaps an aspirational goal. And here's a one of the two raw files that I used to make this image. This one is a 200th of a second, and whatever the f-stop is, it doesn't quite show it on here, but I can find that out for anybody interested. ISO 64, and let's at f22. I stopped it way down, I guess. I don't know why I stopped it way, to get maximum depth of field. That's why I stopped it way down, because I wanted the median strip here. By the way, this is one of those images where you kind of take your life in your hands. You don't want to stick your camera or your butt too far out over the roadway as the cars go by. And, you know, getting there in the first place at dawn is non-trivial. So there's a 4x difference between this exposure at an 800th of a second and this at a 200th. And the moral here is take all the processing that you get at the time, because I'm not going back to the Brandenburg gate anytime soon. So let's see, where is my reduced version here? Good question.
And Donald has a question, Harold.
Yeah.
He says, curious, why did you decide to go with red tail lights in a black and white sepia look?
It's a good question to which I don't have a good answer.
I think it kind of breaks up the darkness.
Yeah. I mean, here, let me back out of this.
It also helps your eye follow along, because you're brought to that.
So let me show a couple of things. I'll think about an answer to that. That was Donald who asked that?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, because some of these decisions are intuitive. They're not really based on any kind of real logic. Yeah, so I mean, it was sexy as hell being in this spot, but there was somehow there's something monotonic about this image, and I wanted to give it some pizzazz. So that was probably really the thinking. I mean, I'm not too conventional about this stuff in the sense that I'm not shooting in the 1930s or 1940s, and I know I have the full panoply of digital stuff at my in my pocket. So this one is 8074. And let me open up the other one. I hope I have a little better luck opening it than I did last time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the two images together, and then I'm going to take the lighter one and put it on top. Okay, like this. And this was 8073. And I'll put a layer on it, layer mask, hide all, and then I'll put a mask going this way with a gradient onto it. And keep in mind that noir is supposed to be, well, noir. So let me duplicate that layer, duplicate layer, and I'm going to bring the duplicate to the top of my stack, put my duplicate into screen blending mode like that, and then I'm going to put a layer mask on top of it, hide all, and I'm going to paint in I'm going to paint in the gate itself so that we can actually see what's down here. So if like that, so you see like a shadow coming through the gate, you could put a, like here, you put this, you could add some, you could add a bit of, and keep in mind I'm using screen blending mode here to lighten things up. Perhaps I'm lightening it too far right now, but you get the idea. And perhaps you want to lighten the center a bit also so you can see the center. Now let me see, I'm going to turn down the overall opacity of this layer, and I'm going to go back to my lighter version here of this image in Bridge, and I'm going to open it up again, and this time I'm going to open it way up so that we have some more light stuff. So that would be plus 2 EV from the exposure. So this was 8073 plus 2 EV. One other thing to keep in mind about why you might do something weird like paint in red taillights in a black and white sepia image is that, and I suppose also is that, you know, the image is already weird. So it's like, I always like to do whatever it is and do it up good. So this was 8074 plus 2. I like when I can to write down what the exposure variation is in a given raw processing, so that I know it for if I want to replicate the effect.
So Harold, here you're doing Hand-HDR and multi-raw processing. You're putting both together.
Correct.
Ah.
Correct. I mean, more multi-raw, truly, but you're right. There are 2 exposures involved here. So Phyllis, perhaps you could put up a link to the Hand-HDR and multi-raw YouTube, or I don't remember, do we not have them up yet? Then we could put up the YouTube channel.
We have the multi-raw, but not the Hand-HDR because we had computer trouble and I haven't been able to get it finished yet. So
okay, so
this weekend, yes,
it'll go up soon. In any case, on the YouTube channel. I think the multi-raw would be the most relevant, anyhow. Before I layer this down and do my headlight painting, are there any questions about what I've done so far?
I'm waiting a minute, see if anything pops up in the chat. Oh, Rita wants to know, do you have the settings for the Sienna color?
Yes, interesting question. So the Sienna color, this is not colorized. This is the way the camera processed the darn thing. I showed you the raw files. I'll go back to the raw files. This is straight out of the camera. Okay, so blame it on air pollution. I mean, seriously, blame it on atmospheric air pollution at sunrise. No filter on the camera.
Maybe it was also like the angle of the sun and.
Well, absolutely. The sun was coming up here past the Brandenburg gate. It really was literally sunrise about 10 minutes before we were in darkness here. And which is an interesting experience, by the way, walking through the Tiergarten in the center of Berlin in darkness. One thing that surprised me was how many people sleep in the Tiergarten at night, at least in the summertime. So keep that in mind for whatever it's worth.
James also has a question.
Yes.
How come the cars did not move when shooting 2 exposures in the field?
Well, they do move. I mean, honestly. So if I if I take off these upper layers and I disable this layer mask, if you look carefully, you'll see that the car here is not in the same position as the next one. So when you're doing this, see it moved from here to here. So when you're doing this, you have to be careful about that. You have to pick the car you want and the exposure you want, basically. Or if you don't do that, you get like a blended effect, like over here, where this one shows obvious motion, right? You can see that if you look up close here. It's okay. So it depends how much of each you put in. I mean, this is all under one's control, but that's a great, but it absolutely does change.
And you have to work fast, I guess.
Right. If you're going to do this kind of thing, you have to work fast or put it in burst mode so that it takes care of the working fast for you. You know, honestly, this kind of comes out looking a bit like a noir snapshot, but there's a little more skill in here than meets the eye. But the skill is primarily in the photography, not in the post-production. Any further questions before I move on to the next step here?
I don't see any at the moment.
But great question about the sienna. I had thought to make it clear that this is the natural color of the thing, which I agree is bizarre. It's, I guess, part of what got me photographing here, because the Brandenburg Gate is sort of such a noir subject itself with all the spy thrillers that go through it. So I just flattened this, or am flattening it as we speak. And before I paint anything in, I want to work on a duplicate layer. So layer, duplicate layer. And I guess one other reason that I would paint it in is I otherwise find these cars a little bit boring. So before you paint something in, you got to pick the color you want to paint. So you can hit the foreground color picker, which is over here, and you find a color. Let's go with something like that. You can also do it, if you don't want to do it by just picking it by eye, you can put it in using one of the different color spaces. You can also move this up and down to pick it from a different part of the spectrum. And once you pick it, as noted, it becomes the foreground color, as you can see here. So one of the reasons that I paint this on a separate layer is that it's very, very easy to overdo it. You also want to, I can't even really see where the taillights are supposed to be here. You also want to have a pretty hard brush when you paint it in. I'm at 30% here. I have my flow at 50%, or will, and I have my opacity at about 35%, and let something like that, okay? So you can then back out a little, and if you think you've overdone it, you can take down the overall opacity of the layer on which you painted the tail light. I think I also wanted to paint in the tail lights to emphasize that car lights were still on. So there you have it. Are there questions about painting in the tail lights here?
No, but Ron has a comment and a question. If I tried that here on one of my roadways, someone would call the cops about a crazy guy in the median strip. Did this happen to you?
Well, Ron, there really are two answers to that. I mean, I have impeccable press credentials, first of all, and in Europe they pay a lot of attention to that, probably more than here. I'm a member of the International Journalists Union, and they have provided me with a portfolio presentation that I open up. It's got my picture in it and a gold seal and all this stuff, and it gets me into every museum in Europe basically free. So that's what I use it for. But no, not on the median. People see the tripod, they know what you're doing. They think you're crazy, but they know what you're doing. I've done this in the median strip in front of San Francisco City Hall as well, on the overpass of I-80 at University Avenue here in Berkeley, and many, many places. That said, the story of my life is to some extent getting kicked out of places by authorities, so that goes with the territory. And you have to expect a bit of it, and you have to also be respectful, I think, of people whose job it is to do that. If they come along, you talk to them, you tell them what you're doing, and you say, oh, if you want me to leave, I'll leave. You know, it's not, what else are you going to do?
Larry says, that happened to me photographing a sunrise off an overpass outside Atlanta. The highway patrol was nice, but I didn't get my shot.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but that has also happened to me. And there have been places where I say there's a photograph here, but I know better than to even try. Because, you know, apart from anything else, in traffic, no photograph is worth seriously risking one's life and other people's. So, but, you know, also there's some advantage to being a tourist in Berlin, because, you know, it's like, what the worst they're going to do is say, Yankee go home or something. They're not gonna get too upset with you.
Crazy American.
Crazy American. I look forward to the days when I'll be able to say that again.
There you go. Oh, Seta would like to know, how did you get the lighting softness on the 1930-40 style shot of the model?
We're going there. We're going there. We should do that one next. Okay, just as a refresher, here's the final here. And the thought is to do high contrast with softness. The bottom line for the softness is, okay, so there are two things for the high contrast and there are two things for the softness. And there probably undoubtedly are other ways to do this. For the high contrast, that's largely about the lighting you use. You don't modify the lighting with a diffuser or umbrella. Then you can toggle the contrast slider when you process the image in Lightroom or Bridge. For the softness, I used Glamour Glow and then a Gaussian blur. So let's have a look at 3 of those 4 things in practice. There are also a couple of lenses that intend to emulate this look via optics these days. The Lens Baby Velvets, that's not primarily what they do, but at some apertures they create an effect that's a lot like the Hurrell lighting kind of effect. It's a lot more like the apochromatic lenses. And there's another, if you look up apochromatic lens, there are some lenses you can find that will do something like this. So here's the raw file this came from. And if you want to bump the contrast, well, that's what a contrast slider is good for. Okay. Say, maybe about here. Then if you want to make it softer, you can take the background layer, you can duplicate the layer, and first let's add a bit of Glamour Glow to it. And you can see if you look closely, I'm not sure how much this comes through on the screens, that actually the highlight on her forehead could certainly use a bit of softening. Okay, let's see if I can get this. Here we are. So with Glamour Glow, what I would do is move the saturation slider up, perhaps to about 20%, and move the glow warmth up as well. And there you go.
Ronnie says, because of you, Harold, I am now addicted to Glamour Glow.
Well.
And Ron says, it strikes me that you could use the same approach for flowers.
Absolutely. And there is another question too. What is the difference between a flower and a beautiful woman?
I was thinking that, but I wasn't going to go there.
What I want to point out here is that I put Glamour Glow on at a pretty high setting for warmth and for saturation, but then in the layer itself, the overall layer, I turned it way down. Okay, so the net impact is not as much as you might think. You can kind of see it here. And then let me duplicate the layer, duplicate layer, and I'm going to go into the Photoshop blur menu, and I'm just going to pick the simplest blur, the Gaussian blur, and this is at 6.4%. Then that is again higher than I would want it to be. And so I'm going to take down the amount of Gaussian blur. No, about that, 46%. So look, we start here with the contrast bumped. We add some Glamour Glow, and we add some Gaussian blur. Then the next thing we're going to want to do is turn it to black and white, of course. Layer, flatten image. Before I go any further, any questions about those two filters?
I don't see anything at
Okay.
the moment. And just so people know, before you flatten, you would save off that version so that if you wanted to go back, you could always go back to it when you had the layers.
Absolutely right. Thank you for the clarification. I'm going to duplicate my layer, and I'm going to apply a black and white adjustment here. Again, if I pull my adjustment over, here we go. And let's see. Okay, hold on a second here. Let's see. Kind of hidden behind my, there we go. So let us try, well, it's a high contrast red is a little bit much. Let's try the red filter adjustment. And just like that isn't bad. I'm going to note that this is red filter preset. And I'm going to go up to the top here, layer, duplicate layer, bring it to the top, and I will go into Nik Silver FX now. And I'm going to apply, well, why don't I apply one of their Noir filters on top of here?
Harold, there have been a couple questions about the difference between black and white adjustment layers and Nik Silver FX Pro.
Okay, give me 1 sec here. Let me just try and get this thing over to the screen so people can see it. Here we go. So let's apply, no, that's kind of awful. This isn't bad, but no, I don't think so really. Oh, you know what? Let's apply a sepia one, antique plate one, but let's make it brighter, and like that. And I'll label it Nik AP1, and I'll put it in at about maybe 20 or 30%. Like about that. Okay, that's a pretty good Noir image. So, so Phyllis, you might want to run up a couple of the black and white webinar we did with the recordings on YouTube as a place to start. Black and white adjustment layers versus Nik Silver FX Pro. Well, do you like, I don't know, tastes differ. That both are good black and white conversion techniques. The Photoshop black and white adjustments are essentially equivalent to what you have in Lightroom, and they're quite good. I mean, probably Nik Silver FX is my go-to, but I mix and match. I think part of the point of showing both here is there's no reason that you have to just have one. Why not use the best from both? So going back again, here's the red filter preset adjustment, and here's a little bit of Antique Plate 1 from Nick Silver Effects layered on top. In a real conversion for me that I wasn't doing in front of a webinar or a workshop audience or something like that, I might well have 10 different layers involved with different impacts on it. I will say that in the presets, the infrared preset and the red ones tend to be my favorites. For Nick, the default Nick, the neutral is pretty good. I also like the high structure Nick, and the high contrast is a great way to add contrast into it. Are there any questions about this one? Or shall I move on to another example? First of all, how do you photograph in a place where there's no light and they don't let you use a tripod or a flash? Exposure data here is ISO 6400 f3.5, which was wide open on the lens I had with me, and a 1/13 of a second held using image stabilization, vibration reduction in Nikon terminology. Carefully is the answer. Then what you would probably do here is boost the exposure and boost the contrast a bit, get some nice shadows, and open up the image. And then with this one, I'm going to put a Nick default layer on top, and then I'm going to put a Nick high structure layer on top to add some structure into the parts that are where the main skulls are. And I mean, one of the things about dealing with an image like this is one needs to be somewhat dispassionate about, this is form and matter, however kind of gruesome it may be. That's all it is. And I see someone saying they could spend a lifetime in Nick, and that's completely true. I think I do. Yeah, what happened to my Nick though? It's doing something.
Looks like it's working hard, Harold.
Yeah, I think so. There we go. Well, that's a good thing. It's working hard, not me, because I'd have to paint in every pixel, right, Phyllis?
That's tough work.
Yeah, if you can get it. So that's Nick neutral. Layer, duplicate layer. Bring it to the top. Roll the hard-working Nick again. And this time we're going to go high structure. High structure 1, just to be absolutely clear.
And Terrence says this is a Dia de los Muertos photo.
Oui, except it's every day. Except it's we, not see.
See, I remember visiting the catacombs when I was in France, and I had my mom along, and it was just the bizarrest thing. It was, dark and strange, and, they had some lighting, like with wires and lights at that time, and, it was very strange.
It was a dark and stormy night. Phyllis, you lived in Paris for a year, right?
Yeah, I did. I was a musician at the time, and I had a scholarship from the École Normale. So I was also learning French at the same time and taking French theory music classes. Oh my goodness, that gave me a headache every day.
But you on purpose lived where there was no English spoken.
Absolutely. Yep. I you know, but I also made a rule for myself just in my own mind. I didn't have to speak French before 10 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't have to speak French after 8 p.m. because that was all my brain could handle. And Rita says, I'm finding similar slowness for multiple layers. Any advice for computer construction, RAM, and processors?
Well,
More
I
is
mean,
better.
yeah. Yeah, keep in mind that this is being processed on the computer that I use for webinars, which is my laptop, not my production machine. Um, the so you know, I don't put up with this in real life.
Yeah, this is an older Apple laptop, right?
Right. It's it's surprisingly old at this point. Every time I've gone into Apple and said, "What can I do to make it better?" Well, there's the business of losing the dongles, and so you know, I haven't really seen it worthwhile. But the two things that are most important if you're building a system for processing photographs fast are the RAM in the system. In my production machine, we have 128 gigs of RAM and the graphics card. Okay, you should get a high-end gaming graphics card with onboard RAM, because that will really redraw the stuff fast enough. I mean, okay, so what I'm basically going to do here is paint in at a fairly high opacity the skulls themselves, like that, with the high structure. So actually, I could paint in the other bones too if you want. Let's just take a look at one of those close up, and then I've had enough of looking at skulls, I think. Okay, so there's the contrast added in. Okay, so here's the final version of this. And here's what the raw file looks like. Note that it's upside down from the actual version, from the final. And so here's a default process of the image, and here's where I ended up. So okay, so let me roll through this for a little instead of just putting it here. Here we have the raw file, and so my goal here is going to be to increase the contrast on the right side. So first of all, note that despite its monochromatic tendencies, this is a color image. So layer, duplicate layer. So the first thing you really have to do with a color image is pick some kind of fairly neutral black and white and turn it to black and white. So I'm going to just run neutral silver FX on it. Okay, so here's a neutral pass here, so-called neutral. So look, I'm just turning this image from color to black and white by doing this, nothing more. And now I'm going to dupe the bottom layer again. Layer, duplicate layer. By the way, it's a good habit in terms of workflow to leave your color version at the bottom of a black and white, okay, come on, a black and white layer stack. Filter, Nick, Silver FX Pro. This time I'm going to go high structure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it with a layer mask so that the structure reads right to left. And then after that, I'm going to put on the Antique Plate 1 filter with the sepia tint that I used in the Hurrell lighting example to add a little bit of antiquing to this image. So let's put on the high structure here, like that. And then I'll turn it right side up or upside down. Up is down and down is up, right, fellas?
That's right. And you go left to go right. And we stayed in to get busy.
Oh, yes, we are working on a new book.
Yeah, we just signed the contract yesterday. Woohoo! It's so exciting. So sometime next year, about June.
About June.
There'll be another one.
And this one is about photographic composition. So it's a pretty different topic. Layer mask, high doll, and something that I have strong anarchistic feelings about. So you see what I did there, so that the right side of this got defined. There it is off, there it is on, with a gradient tool. I'm going to duplicate the bottom layer, duplicate, filter, and we have a nice design for the book that is completely unconventional.
Oh, Curtis would like to know, why did you add the gradient?
I added the gradient. Let me just let Nick finish here, and I'll go back to it and show it to you. The short answer is I wanted to have it defined on the right, but not defined on the left. So let me just put an Antique Plate 1 in here, and then I'll take that off. And we really should look at the Film Noir presets too, which are totally cool. But here, let me go back there for a second. Okay, so for a second here, I will take this off. So looking at this layer, I'm going to disable my layer mask. Okay, so you see it's all at the same level of detail and structure. In my pre-visualization of this image, what I saw was that the pavement on the right should be defined, but the left shouldn't be any stronger than it was. So if you look at what this layer mask is like, see, so white reveals, black conceals. So the white side of this layer mask shows the entire image, but on the black on the left side, there's nothing doing. So when I put this on at about 20%, that's the final black and white rendition that I wanted. And then I could layer it down and flatten it. And I can rotate it. And that's how I present the image. A tower, a sinister tower with light coming through it. But if you look carefully, you can see that it's sidewalk, which is resolved on the right side of the image, going to the fainter part of the image on the left. Are there questions about this? Are there questions generally? Pre-visualization, great topic. I mean, because that's such a key skill in photography and so mysterious in a way. Ansel Adams talked about it a lot. And, you know, my own problem with that is somewhat that I'm a bit anarchistic, as I said. So I go into something and I have a pre-visualization and then it comes out differently. And I say, well, I like that too, or I like it better. And and where am I? And there I am. But it's a vital skill because you at least have to have a pretty good handle on how the changes you make are going to impact the image at the end. And that's what pre-visualization is about. It's not necessarily saying I have to stick exactly according to the plan, but it is saying I need to know what the plan is and what happens when I do various things to it. And this is what I'm hoping for, kind of. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to say, stay healthy, and thank you very much for spending this time with us.
I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. Be creative and stay mighty.